Hey, what's up? Scott Balkum here from Imagination Creation Films, and today we're talking about the Panasonic GH5. The Panasonic GH5 has been out for quite a while now. In fact, it's almost a year old since it's been introduced. So this video should not be taken as this is the very first time, very first touch of the GH5. This is me using this camera for about 9 months, 8 months. There are a few things that you're gonna wanna know about the GH5 before you go plopping down $2,000. Before I break down into this long GH5 review, I would love to ask that you subscribe to this channel, mostly because I'm trying to grow this filmmaking community, and I think you would be an excellent part of this community. So if you could just do me a favor and click that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, stick around to the end and catch up on our giveaway that we're having this week. It ends very shortly, but get you some awesome lens gears. Now, as I go through these things, I'm going to kind of dive off on a tangent on each one of these as I go, just because they're on the top of my head. So I apologize for the oddness of this review, but I want it to be thorough and complete. So a couple of things that we're going to go over. We're going to go over the GH5 itself. We're going to compare it to the GH5S that was just announced, and we're going to compare it to some of the other cameras that are out there in this sphere. One odd thing about this is I am recording with the GH5, mostly because I'm not willing to record it with anything else because I like the look that the GH5 gives me for all these types of conversations. So what I will end up doing is probably shooting some B-roll of the GH5 and intercutting that into the actual conversation here, or maybe I just won't at all, but I assure you the GH5 is right there. Here's some video from my phone and just focused on my finger, and there it is, you can see it. And it is working exceptionally well. So here are the things you want to know about the GH5, the pros and the cons. And I'm just going to go all over the map. I apologize because I don't have it sitting in front of me. I'm just kind of looking at it there, trying to remember all of my points, and I don't write notes down on these shows. I actually just shoot them straight from the brain. First things with the GH5, it is a micro four thirds mirrorless camera, and that means it's gonna have a very small sensor. So the micro four thirds sensor is a very small sensor, but does have interchangeable lenses. The sensor is actually on a 5-axis stabilization. On some cameras, there's no stabilization, which ends up with a shaky shot. Some cameras use lens stabilization, which can only be 2-axis, and that helps a little bit. Some cameras have digital stabilization where they actually shift the pixels around a little bit, and that somewhat works, but sometimes can introduce some strange artifacts. The GH5 actually has a sensor stabilizer. So it's 5-axis, and I don't know what they all are. I think at some point there's involves some time travel. So what it is the sensor can actually float around inside the body. So if you're jerking it around, the sensor's kind of just staying still. That is huge when you're hand holding, and it makes some beautiful shots. If you watch my montage video, you can see several of those shots in there where I'm hand holding it and it's really nice and smooth. Now, what are some negatives of that? It has a very strange effect if you turn that on and you're on, say, a tripod and you pan over real fast. What happens is you pan over and you stop, and then the sensor kind of corrects itself. And that can get a little annoying because it makes it feel like you screwed up your pan, because you pan and you stop, but the sensor just kind of does this number. So make sure if you're on a tripod and you're going to be doing some fast movements, turn that off. And in theory, you should have all your image stabilization turned off when you're on a tripod anyway. I've discovered a way to review the actual camera without holding it in my hand, since it's right there. I've got the brochure that I got from NAB, and basically what I wanted to get on here was the stats that I oddly cannot read. Yeah, okay. The sensor itself it's a 21 megapixel sensor, but because of the way that it moves and it has some digital stabilization and some other features, it actually ends up being a 20 megapixel sensor. Now, it takes really nice photos and it shoots really nice video. Its dynamic range is around 13 stops if you're using the V-Log and about 12 stops if you're using non-V-Log, so any other picture profiles. The features that I like most on it, and these are the features that I'm using every single day because I've been shooting on this continuously. And yes, I do have my red and I shoot my red for anything that requires the very top level. A lot of my landscape stuff is shot on the red and you can't beat this. This does a really good job of coming in second. And I have a lot of different cameras. There's the A7R II, I have the G7, iPhone. They're all a variety of looks. I am most pleased in 4K with the GH5. Now, for 6K, you can't beat it. The dynamic range of the red, you can't beat it. The Sony does fairly well in 4K, and I like it, but I don't like it as much as I like the GH5. Back to those features that I use. So I really, really like the optional audio interface that mounts on top. And you can see it here. Hopefully I shot a B-roll of it, but if not, it's on top, and it allows me to use wireless mics in their native format into an easily adjustable interface. So I can adjust pots with just my finger. I don't have to go through a menu system, and it does have phantom power. I can run any kind of audio through it. It works really, really well. And I use the microphone that's here, that runs here, the wireless that goes over there, and it plugs right into that. That uses the battery power from the GH5. That's also a nice benefit. Now, it will consume the battery a little bit faster because you're running phantom power and you're powering another device, but it works out nice. I also like the battery grip that goes in the bottom. The battery grip at the bottom makes the camera just a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier, but allows you to have 2 batteries. It also allows you to have hot swappable batteries. Now, there's a caveat with that. Understand, if the camera is operating on the battery grip and you pull the battery out, it has to flip over to the internal. If you force it to do that, it will blip your recording and your settings. If it switches over on its own, then it works just fine. And then you can swap out the battery in the battery grip. As soon as you put it back in, it'll detect it and switch it back, and it's fine. But if you force it, it blips. So don't force it. So usually what I do is I carry around the extra batteries in my pocket. So it will display on the screen at the top right. It has a little battery indicator, and then it says BG. If it says BG, that means that you're running on the battery grip. If it doesn't say BG, then you're on internal. So as I'm recording and I'm watching and I see all of a sudden it's no longer on BG, I pull out the battery, pop it in the other one, it automatically detects it and then flips it back over. Panasonic says this is limitless hot swappable batteries. That's not true because you're slowly depleting that internal every time you switch to it. So you're gonna last all day if you can get to it within 5 minutes. So it's not really that big of a deal, but it's not limitless. Another feature that I use is the full-size Hdmi. I love this because I have it plugged in here and I go over to my monitor right over here and I watch. Well, when I watch, I do, but it's super fast and easy to not have to have a pigtail. It plugs into anything. I can show my footage anywhere, and that's nice. So let's walk around the features on the outside of the camera. So it does have an actual dedicated record button for video, and it's not too terribly hard to get to. It does have a aperture and a shutter speed dial, so you can dial in your settings very easily. It also has a rotational dial on the menu function on the back. It also has a little joystick that you can manipulate around anything. It's also touchscreen. So pretty much if there's a way that you've ever learned how to operate a camera, this one is going to have that ability. Obviously the menus would be a little different, but if you're used to a joystick, you can use a joystick. If you're used to, you can use any combination of that, including the touchscreen. And I happen to forget about the touchscreen half the time. I'm just so used to cruising around the menus with the dials. That rotational dial on the back is one of my favorites because you can go through really fast. You can switch between 5 different displays on the screen itself. And you do that through an oddly placed button at the top right of the grip, so you can actually bump into that occasionally. You just get used to not bumping into it and keep your thumb away from it. The screen is reversible, flip outable, so it's perfect for vlogging, vloggers, anybody who wants to see themselves while they're doing it. I just use a monitor now. I used to sit there and try to, and then I realized, oh yeah, it's got a full-size HDMI. Let me use that. Genius. So on the top, it does have white balance and ISO, and then also a function key, and then plus or minus. The thing about the keys on this camera, which are really interesting, is you can assign any key to do anything you want. So if you don't like that wastebasket button, then assign it to peak focus. If you don't like function 1 being whatever, then turn it into extended teleconversion. You can change any of these buttons around by remapping the keys. That's a little bit cool because I actually use that like crazy because all the functions that I use all the time, I have them mapped to custom keys and I can move around really quickly. One thing as well that the GH5 has is memory settings, and you have 5 custom memory settings, and this will save every single thing that you modify. It's a little much in my opinion. So if you alter the way that the waveform shows up and where it sits on the screen, and you save that as a custom memory, then when you pull that back up, it's going to go there. If you set it on f5.6 and ISO 800, when you recall it, it's going back to ISO 800 and f5.6. It's a little much in my opinion. I would love to be able to say, ignore these settings and keep, let's say I'm outside and I'm flipping between a couple of settings and I already have my exposure set. When I flip and I choose my new custom memory, then it changes what my f-stop was, it changes what my ISO was, it even changes my focus. So I have to go back and redo that. That's a little bit of a, I don't know, it's not major, but it's just a little bit of a gripe that I would say. But you get 5 settings. And let me give you an example of the settings that I use. I will set it, one of them to be 10-bit, 400 megabits, 4K. I'll set one of them to 60 frames a second, 4K. I'll set one of them to 8-bit, 24 frames a second, and 4K. And then I'll set one to, say, 180 frames a second at 1080. So I can just sit there and flip those really quickly and get my shot fast. That is a really nice feature that I do enjoy. How to get around the menu system. Sometimes it can feel a little much because there are like 9 pages on one menu alone. And I mean, it is a lot of settings that you can adjust. That's a good thing and it's a bad thing. The good thing though is that you have a favorite section. So all the commands that you use all the time, you can save those into your favorites, like format. You're dropping cards in and out. As soon as you push the menu button, you're in your favorites, and then you can just select your format or whatever you have in your list of favorites. And I don't know how many you can put in there, but I haven't exhausted it yet. Picture quality. In 4K, you can shoot a variety of resolutions of 4K. So there's DCI 4K and then there's UHD. UHD is 3840 by 2160 and then DCI is 4096 by 2160. You could shoot in 8-bit or 10-bit, and then you can shoot in 100 megabits for 8-bit, 150 for 10-bit, or 400 megabits for 10-bit. And the 400 megabits is almost unneeded, but it's like 99.9% you won't notice it, but that 0.01%, you will notice the difference between 400 megabits and 150. For the most part, you don't need to shoot 10-bit unless you're shooting stuff like the sky or anything with a gradient. So the sky is really bad in 8-bit because it'll band really easily. With 10-bit, it won't do that. Now, you still have to finish in 10-bit, and then if you're going to YouTube, it's going to go right back to 8-bit. So if you're doing a finished project and it's going out as 10-bit, it's awesome. You can also shoot 60 frames a second. 60 frames a second is pretty nice in 4K. That gives you 2.5 times slow motion on a 24 FPS time base. That's nice, and you're still in 4K, and it looks amazing. Now, autofocus. Because I'm going off on a tangent. Autofocus works okay. It's gotten a lot better with the firmware changes, and there's a few things you want to do to make it work. Face detection works really well for keeping you in focus. When you switch over to 60 frames per second, there's no autofocus. Doesn't exist anymore, so you're going to have to manually focus. When you switch to any kind of variable frame rate, it's gone. So get used to focusing, and you're going to need it. So 60 frames a second in 4K with stabilization on it, you can get some beautiful, beautiful shots as you are hand holding that and just spinning around anything. It looks amazing. That entire montage video was shot GH5 at 60 frames a second. Some of it handheld, some of it tripod, but it looks great. In 2K or 1080p, you can shoot up to 180. I wouldn't go past 120 if you really care about how it looks. In 1080 at 180 frames per second, there's just not enough bandwidth to make it look right. Back to the variable frame rate though, you can select not just 60 frames a second, but you can select 50 or 45. You can select any kind of variable frame rate you want. That's powerful because you can dial in exactly what you want. For example, when you are shooting a love scene or any kind of romance, anything that just requires a little bit of finesse, shoot it in 26 frames a second as opposed to 24. Why? Because it just adds a little extra slowness in there that makes people feel less clumsy. Because let's be honest, if you have a kiss in your scene, that unless those people are married and do that every day, they're gonna feel a little clumsy. So at 26 frames a second over 24, it makes it just a little bit smoother. A little tip there. So for base frame rate, which is what it's basing your project on, you can shoot in NTSC, which is 23.98 frames per second or 59.96 or 97. And you can also shoot in PAL, which is 50 frames a second. You can also shoot in cinema, and cinema is 24.00 frames per second. And that is actually what a film camera shoots. The 23.98 actually comes from television. So if you're shooting and you're going to cinema, you want to shoot in 24. If you're shooting and you're going to anything cable, you would do 23.98. It also has the ability to shoot what they call 6K photo. And it allows you to shoot 24 frames a second in 6K. It is not 6K wide, it's 5K wide. They call it 6K because it's tall. And I don't agree with the math that they come up with. I would call it a 5K image, but they're calling it 6K. But it shoots more than 4K at only 24 frames a second. And it looks pretty good. I don't use it because it has a lot of limitations to it. It looks better than standard 400 megabits, 10-bit 4K. Battery life. Battery life is respectable on this. You're going to shoot about an hour to hour and a half on a battery. You put the battery grip on there, obviously you double that, and then you can continuously operate. If you put the audio interface on top, you're going to knock out about 20 to 30% of that. But battery life is pretty nice. I mean, the A7R2, it eats batteries like crazy. This one is much better. For photos, it takes really nice photos. It's only 20 megapixels, so understand that. But you can take some beautiful photos with it, and it's pretty fast on autofocus when it comes to photos. So one gripe that I have, and it's really kind of a strangeness, is the custom white balance. So it has all the standard white balances in there for sunny, cloudy, tungsten, you name it. But to get to a custom one, you have to go and you select the custom, but you don't select it. If you selected it, it just selects whatever it was. You go to the custom, and then you have to press the white balance button on top, and then you can dial in what you want it to be, and then you can select it. This feels really wrong. Why should I have to reach all the way over there when I could just hit an up button or what have you? That feels wrong, but you know, it's so minuscule. Another gripe I have is the viewfinder little eye cup pops off at a whim. I've already replaced mine once because I don't even know where it ended up. It's too easy to fall off, and I would love for that to be a little more permanently fixed. Weight-wise and size-wise, it is a very compact camera. It is very, I don't know, it's a lot heavier than a G7, but it's pretty lightweight compared to like an A7R2. Weather sealing, it's a lot more weather sealed than other cameras like a G7. It's about equal to like an A7R II, which is not fully weather sealed. Now, another feature that it has that is really nice is dual card slots. So SD cards, it can record to one card and then flip over to the next one, so you can sit there and do continuous shooting, or you can record to both at the same time for backup. That is a huge saver if you're using this on a production set, which there's no reason you couldn't use this on a lot of productions. And just having that extra backup it takes a little weight off your chest. It does have Wi-Fi built in, so you can offload your photos back to your app, to your phone. You can also use it as a remote viewfinder, so you could be watching it and you can control the camera with the Panasonic app while connected to it, and that's kind of handy. You cannot use the app and an external monitor at the same time. It will not work. You also, if you have an external monitor plugged in, you cannot watch playback on the view screen. You have to watch it on the external monitor. That's a little weird, but I guess there's just not enough processing power. When they first brought out the GH5 and they announced it and they delivered it, they said a lot of these features will be coming soon with firmware upgrades. And honestly, they did do exactly what they said. Everything that they said it would do, they have delivered in GH5 firmware upgrades. So, kudos to Panasonic for doing that, because having a support of your manufacturer in your camera and not just releasing it and then letting it go, that means a lot. Who is this camera for? Well, if you are a vlogger or a filmmaker or a storyteller or a small production, this camera is going to be an excellent choice for you because it does so many of the things that you want it to do. The quality of the output is beautiful. The dynamic range is very good. In its market, it's probably one of the better 4K images out there. It's a $2,000 camera, and I wouldn't hesitate to say it is on par with an A7R III or a A7S II or any of those cameras in that area. They're a little bit different from each other, but this one's $2,000 and these are $3,000. And aside from low light, the GH5 image, I think, looks better than the S-Log2 or the S-Log3 and the A7S II. It is well worth your time to look at the GH5 as your main camera in a small production. And I know several of my friends are using GH5s now, and they're loving it. It's a solid camera. So the GH5S just got announced, and what it is it's using a new Sony sensor that has less pixel density, which allows for lower light capability. It is better than the GH5. It's not fantastic, and it's definitely not on par with the A7S II for low light. The low light capabilities of the GH5, you should understand that it gets noisy after ISO 1600. And in fact, at 1600, you can see a little bit of noise in the shadows. You can work that out. You can put a little denoising on there and you'll be fine. But if you go above 1600, you need to understand there's going to be noise. Now, from what I have seen from the GH5S and some friends who've been shooting with it, it gives you an extra stop. You could probably go to ISO 3200 and be about the same. Is that worth it? I don't think so. And a lot of things that you lose the image stabilization that's built onto the sensor. You lose 20 megapixels over 10 megapixels. You lose the 6K photo. I don't know that it's worth it. It costs a lot more. Picture profiles. So with the GH5, it comes with a natural, it comes with a vivid, it comes with a standard, it comes with a lot of different picture profiles. You can also buy for $100 the Vlog upgrade. And it's a license that you get from Panasonic and then you install, and it allows a very, very flat picture. And in fact, if you would like to see what this looks like in the native Vlog, now we're looking at it in that format and everything is gray. Look at the back behind me. It's like washed out. I mean, it really looks like it's almost overexposed, but it's not. But this allows you to stretch your contrast and adjust your colors. And it has taken me quite a long time to get used to exposing for a vlog and getting it to look right. If you go back to many of my vlogs and many of my reviews and many of my other stuff from the past when I started shooting with this, they never quite looked right. And I have recently figured it out and figured out exactly where to expose and to figure all of that out. And I'll probably do a video on that one day just because it would probably help a lot of other people. And I'm finally kind of dialed into my color look and my exposure, and I feel pretty good about it. You know, have a little patience with learning how vlog. Vlog is not something that the average consumer is going to use because it takes a lot of work in post to make it look pretty. I use the standard picture profiles when I'm like out and about and I'm just doing a quick little like vlog or anything. But if I want something to really look good, I use the vlog. And the vlog also allows you to install LUTs. Now, a LUT is a lookup table. And a lookup table basically remaps colors to make it look like something else. So you can apply the standard LUT so that it looks like a normal standard, but it's exposing in vlog. You can apply that. You can apply Rec 709, which is the standard for television. You can apply all of these different LUTs in the camera so you can actually see what it's going to look like approximately, because you still have to tweak it afterwards. You know, back to who this is for. I mean, this is for small to mid production companies, anybody who's looking to take their vlogs or their videos or their stories to the next level. This will provide that extra depth of color, that extra range of features. It also lets you take that next step in like audio interfaces. There's a lot of stuff that it has that really benefits this type of work right here. And I mean, I could be shooting with the Red, but this is so much easier than shooting with this. I could be shooting with the A7R, but this is so much easier. The G7, I like it. This is so much easier. To get this to look like this and to use the way that I'm shooting it, you've got the $2,000 camera, you've got a $1,000 lens, you've got a $400 battery grip, you've got a $400 audio interface, and then you've got a $600 wireless. You've got all of that to make this, plus the $100 vlog. So $200, $300, $400, $4,500 that this is. So it's not for the faint of heart, but it's super powerful for $4,500. But you could also use smaller, lesser lenses. I mean, I've got some lenses that I paid, I think $200 for, and they work great. They're just not zoomable, and they don't have the in-lens stabilization as well. Do I like the GH5? Yes, I love the GH5. Is it for everyone? No way. It is not for the faint of heart. It's not for a light pocketbook. It's something you should grow into. I mean, if you have the G7 or you have the A6300 or you have a smaller point and shoot, and you've exhausted its capabilities and you need to take it to that next level, then I would seriously look at the GH5 because it will take you to that next level, provided your skill set is there to handle it. That comes with a learning curve and it will take some time. I mean, it took me a lot longer than I expected to get vlog to look the way I wanted, but it does work. So in closing, we are having a giveaway. We're still in process right now. It ends at the end of this week. We are giving away a 3-pack of lens gears from Wide Open Camera. Do click on that link below in the show notes and register. All you gotta do is subscribe to me on YouTube, and you do have to be subscribed when I pull the winner for you to win. And then follow me on Twitter, all that kind of stuff. It's not that big of a deal. And quite honestly, it's just to help grow the channel and give a little bit of shout out to Wide Open Camera for giving away the lens gears. You can see my lens gear video, it's in a link below as well. As always, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. I do try to respond to all comments, even if it's just to say thank you. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Do click that subscription button because I really do want to grow this community and I really do think you'd be a great part of this. Click that little alert bell next to subscribe and that'll let you know every time I upload a new video because you want to know, right? And then also, if you would be so kind as to tell all your friends about this channel because I'm here to show a variety of education and to build this community. And I would really appreciate your support in doing that. Also, if you didn't know, I do have a Patreon. If you'd like to support me that way, there's a link down below in the notes section. Please help me out on Patreon. I would appreciate that. So, as always, this has been Scott Balkum from Imagination Creation Films, and as I like to leave it with, don't let your passions center around your life. Let your life center around your passions.